He left her asleep in the hotel room, walked down to the beach in the dark, and went home with a stranger. Then he came back, kissed her parents good morning, and slid into bed beside the woman he was about to marry like nothing in the world had happened. I didn't know any of that yet, the day I said yes to being her maid of honor. If I had, I would never have let myself get pulled into the most exhausting, heartbreaking, head-splitting year of my life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning because you need all of it to understand why, 2 months before the wedding, I finally walked away. My name doesn't matter as much as hers does, so let's start there. Her name is Nina. We met when we were both 20, two girls who clicked the way you only seem to click when you're young and the whole world still feels like it's waiting for you. For 7 years, she was the person I called first. First when something good happened, first when something fell apart. She was at every birthday, every breakup, every move into a new flat. When you've known someone that long, they stop being a friend and start being a kind of family you chose on purpose. So when she sat me down in January of last year, grabbed both my hands across the table, and asked me to be her maid of honor, I actually teared up. I remember the exact cafe, even. It was one of those tiny corner places we'd been going to since university, with the wobbly table by the window and the barista who knew our orders before we said them. The windows were fogged up from the cold outside, and there were little rivulets of condensation running down the glass, and Nina had this nervous energy about her, stirring her coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. I should have read more into how carefully she'd staged it, the way she'd asked me to meet her specifically, the way she kept glancing up at me like she was working up to something. I thought maybe she had bad news. Instead, she had this. "You're serious?" I said, and my voice cracked a little. We were only 26 at the time. Neither of us had ever done anything like a wedding before. It felt enormous, like being handed something precious and being told, "Here, this is yours to protect." "Of course I'm serious," she laughed. "Who else would it be? You're my person." I said yes before she even finished the sentence. I said it 3 times. Yes, yes, yes. The wedding was set for the summer of the following year, which felt like forever away, plenty of time to plan, plenty of time for everything to fall into place. I walked home that night feeling like I'd been entrusted with a job I would absolutely not screw up. I had no idea how much that promise was going to cost me. I called Daniel on the walk home, my breath clouding in front of me, my free hand jammed into my coat pocket. I was practically skipping along the pavement. She asked me. I told him, and I could hear him smiling down the line. "Of course she did," he said. "You two are joined at the hip." I told him I wanted to do it properly. The speeches, the surprises, the whole production. I had this picture in my head already fully formed of the day. Nina in white, glowing. Me beside her, fixing her veil, handing her a tissue. I fell asleep that night turning it over like a smooth pebble, this lovely warm image, and it never once occurred to me that the picture could rot from the inside before it ever got the chance to come true. Here's the part one should be honest about, though. I had always had a quiet, gnawing concern about Nina's relationship. Her fiancé, let's call him Marcus, had been with her since they were both 19. On paper, that sounds romantic, childhood sweetheart stuff, the kind of love story people put on save-the-date cards. But there was always something underneath it that made the back of my neck prickle. Marcus had been with a lot of women before Nina. A lot. And Nina had only ever been with him. One person. Ever. She used to talk about it late at night after a couple of glasses of wine, in this small voice that didn't sound like her at all. "Do you think it's weird?" she asked me once, curled up on my sofa with a blanket pulled to her chin, "that I've never been with anyone else? Like, ever? He's done everything and I've done nothing." I remember the way her eyes glistened in the lamplight. It wasn't a casual question. It was something that had been eating at her for years, the way a small stone in your shoe becomes the only thing you can think about on a long walk. She had full-blown breakdowns about it sometimes. Real ones. Where she'd cry until her face went blotchy and ask me whether she'd missed out on her whole life by locking herself to one man before she'd even figured out who she was. I tried to reassure her in those moments. I'd put the kettle on and sit cross-legged across from her and tell her that there's no scoreboard, that a number doesn't measure a life, that plenty of people find their person early and never look back and feel nothing but lucky for it. And while I said those things I meant them, mostly. But there was always a second voice in the back of my own head, quieter, that I never let out of my mouth. Said, "She isn't asking because she feels lucky. She's asking because some part of her feels trapped, and she's hoping you'll tell her the door isn't locked." I never knew how to answer that voice, so I just refill her tea and let her cry and pretend the question had a simple answer. At one point, and I only know this because she told me herself, she'd suggested they open the relationship or even try a threesome, just so she could feel like she'd experienced something, anything, beyond the four walls of the only love she'd ever known. Marcus shut it down instantly. "Absolutely not," he told her. "Not a chance." And the cruel irony of that, the thing that would later make me want to put my fist through a wall, is that the rules he set for her were never the rules he set for himself. He wanted her loyal and untouched and grateful. He wanted to keep every door open for himself and bolt every one of hers shut. Then there was the Instagram thing. Marcus followed thousands, and I mean thousands, of extremely explicit accounts. Cam girls, content creators, the kind of accounts where the whole point is the body and nothing else. Some of them were freshly 18, which made my skin crawl in a way I didn't even have words for. It was all completely public. Anyone could scroll his following list and see it laid out like a catalog. Nina told me it made her feel like garbage, like she was competing with an endless feed of women she could never look like, and finally she worked up the nerve to bring it up with him. He was so understanding about it, she said. So mature. He told her he completely understood, that he'd cut it out, that he never wanted her to feel that way. And he did unfollow a chunk of them, maybe 700, she figured. For about a week she felt seen. She felt like he'd actually heard her. And then the number started creeping back up. New accounts. New follows. Hundreds of them. Like a tide that pulls back just far enough to make you think it's leaving, then comes roaring back in. Eventually Nina just stopped looking. She decided that if she didn't check, it couldn't hurt her. She buried it. I watched her bury it, and I said nothing because what was I supposed to say? It was her relationship. It was her line to draw or not draw. I remember the one evening she actually showed me the list, scrolling through it on her phone with her thumb moving fast, narrating it in this flat, brittle voice that was trying very hard to sound like she found it funny. "Look, this one's 19. This one does like subscription stuff. This one he follows, but I've never even seen her face. It's all just..." And she'd trail off and laugh, but the laugh had no floor under it. I sat next to her on the bus seat and watched her thumb keep flicking and flicking, and I wanted so badly to take the phone out of her hand and say, "You don't have to keep doing this to yourself." But I didn't. I just let her scroll until she got tired of it and locked the screen and stared out the window at the rain, and neither of us said another word about it the whole ride home. They moved in together when they were 23, into a tiny one-bedroom flat that was barely big enough for two people and all their resentments. One single month after they moved in, he proposed. Now, I want to be fair because Nina had been campaigning for that ring for years. She talked about it constantly. She made little digs at him about it at dinner parties, the kind of jokes that aren't really jokes. "When's he gonna put a ring on it? Eh?" she'd say, nudging me, laughing, but with this edge in her voice. So when it finally happened, she was overjoyed. She'd gotten the thing she'd wanted for so long. I hugged her and told her congratulations, and I meant it. I did, even as that little stone in my own shoe pressed a bit harder. The proposal itself was lovely by all accounts. He'd done it on the little balcony of the new flat, string lights and everything, and she rang me that same night nearly hyperventilating with joy, holding her hand up to the phone camera so I could see the ring catch the light. "Look, look, look," she kept saying, and I oohed and ahed and felt genuinely happy for her in that moment, because her happiness was real and it was contagious and I loved her. It was only later, lying in bed, that the timing snagged at me. 1 month after moving in. After years of her practically begging. I told myself I was being cynical. I told myself people propose when they're ready and not a second before, and maybe living together had finally shown him what he had. I wanted to believe the soft version. I always wanted to believe the soft version, right up until I couldn't. They wanted a baby, too. Desperately. They tried, a lot, in that cramped little flat with paper-thin walls, and it broke my heart because there were a couple of miscarriages along the way. Real losses, real grief, the kind that hollows a person out. I held her through those, brought her soup and bad films and let her cry on me until my shoulder was soaked. Through all of it, I kept telling myself the same thing on a loop. Okay, well, they love each other. Maybe she's made her peace with the Instagram stuff. Maybe that's just who they are, and who am I to judge? As long as they're happy. And honestly, they seemed happy. They seemed in love. I think about those nights a lot now, the soup and bad films nights, because they were the realest we ever got. There was one in particular, after the second loss, when she fell asleep on my sofa mid-sentence, completely spent, and I sat there in the dark not wanting to move and wake her. I looked at her face, slack and exhausted and younger looking in sleep, and I felt this fierce, almost violent protectiveness toward her. Whatever it takes, I thought, I will carry her through this. I had no idea, sitting in that dark, that the very thing I'd end up needing to carry her through was him, and that she'd refuse to be carried away from it. The four of us spent so much time together, me, Nina, Marcus, and my own partner, Daniel. We did weekend trips and dinners and lazy Sunday afternoons that stretched into evenings. Daniel and Marcus got on like a house on fire. They became genuine friends, texting about football, planning their own little outings. We were a unit, a foursome, and for a while things were actually looking up. The wedding was on the horizon. The bad days seemed to be behind them, and I let myself get excited. I let myself believe the story they were telling. Until October. There was a weekend that spring, before any of it came out, when the four of us drove up to a little cottage in the hills, and I keep returning to it because of how ordinary and good it felt. We played cards until 2 in the morning. Marcus made this elaborate breakfast the next day, humming to himself at the stove, and Daniel kept stealing bits of bacon off the pan, and Nina was laughing so hard at something that she had to put her fork down. I took a photo of the three of them at the table, sunlight coming through the window, and I remember thinking, this is it, this is the good stuff, this is what we'll all look back on. That photo is still on my phone. I can't bring myself to look at it now because I know that by then he'd already done it. He was already carrying the secret, and he sat there flipping eggs and humming like the most contented man alive. In October, my phone buzzed with a message from Nina. It was a screenshot. A girl, a complete stranger, had messaged Nina on Instagram, claiming, plainly and without drama, that she had cheated with Marcus. My stomach dropped through the floor. Nina's caption above the screenshot was almost dismissive. "Look at this," she wrote. "Some scammers trying to mess with me, lol." She didn't believe it. She wanted me to laugh it off with her, to tell her people are crazy, to make it small. I was standing in my kitchen when it came through, halfway through making dinner, a wooden spoon in one hand. I remember turning the heat down under the pan very slowly, very deliberately, like if I moved carefully enough I could keep the moment from becoming what it was about to become. The LOL at the end of her message is what I keep coming back to. That tiny, hopeful, terrified LOL. She wasn't sending it to me because she thought it was nothing. She was sending it to me because she needed it to be nothing, and she'd picked the one person she trusted to make it so. And I stood there with my dinner going cold knowing I was about to fail her in exactly the way she was asking me not to. But the second I read it, I knew. I can't fully explain how, except that some part of me had been waiting for this exact message for years without ever admitting it. Every prickle on the back of my neck, every buried doubt, every late-night question Nina had asked me. It all came rushing up at once and assembled itself into one cold certainty. This was true. I texted her back carefully. Don't just write it off. Ask her for proof. Keep digging. You owe it to yourself to actually know. Part of me hoped I was wrong. A bigger part of me already knew I wasn't. She didn't reply for almost an hour. I watched the little delivered sit there under my message, and I paced my flat, and I picked the dinner at without tasting any of it, and I texted Daniel something vague about Nina having a rough night so he wouldn't ask questions I couldn't answer. When her reply finally came, it was just 3 dots, then nothing, then 3 dots again. I could see her typing and deleting, the whole drawn-out agony of someone deciding whether to step off a ledge they already knew they were standing on. When the message finally landed, it just said, "Okay." Asking her. 2 words. I sat down on the kitchen floor with my back against the cupboards and waited. The girl came through with proof. And the story that came out of it was almost unbelievable in how casually cruel it was. It had happened the previous spring on a family holiday, a trip Nina had been so excited about, the kind where you bring the parents along and take photos at sunset. One night, Marcus waited until Nina was asleep in their hotel room. Then he got up, went down to the beach, and met this girl. He went back to her hotel. He tried to sleep with her, and apparently couldn't even manage it, couldn't get it up, which the girl mentioned almost as an afterthought. And then he simply came home. He walked back to the hotel where his fiancée was sleeping, greeted her parents in the lobby with a smile and a good morning, and climbed back into bed beside Nina like he'd just gone for an early swim. That's the part that haunted me. Not just the act, but the morning after. The performance. The casual ease with which he kissed her parents and slipped back under the covers. From that spring all the way to October, Nina had no reason on earth to doubt him. He gave her none. He had absolutely no intention of ever telling her. The only reason she found out at all was because a stranger with a guilty conscience or an axe to grind decided to send a message. If that girl had stayed quiet, Nina would have walked down the aisle never knowing. I keep trying to picture the lobby. That's the detail my brain snags on and won't release. The sand probably still on his feet, or rinsed off in the sea on the way back so no one would notice. Her parents, who adored him, who'd told everyone what a catch their daughter had landed, sitting there with their morning coffees, looking up and saying, "Morning, love, you're up early," and him smiling and saying something easy and warm. Her mother, her father. I imagine him buttering toast. I imagine him asking what the plan was for the day. The sheer, blank-faced calm it would take to do that, to fold a betrayal that fresh into something that smooth, is the thing about Marcus I have never been able to get past. It's not the lust. Lust I can almost understand. It's the breakfast. I expected the world to end. I expected Nina to detonate, to throw his things onto the street, to call the wedding off in a blaze of righteous fury. What actually happened was this. She spent one night at her mother's place. One. And the very next day, she went right back to their apartment. Back to him. Back to the bed. I was mortified. I genuinely could not process it. I have made partners grovel for so much less, for a careless comment, for forgetting something important, for a tone of voice I didn't like. And here was the love of her life, who had snuck out to cheat on her on a family holiday and then lied by omission for 6 straight months. And she let him back in after a single night away. I felt this hot, sick anger rise up in me, and underneath the anger was something colder. The dawning understanding that her values and my values were not the same. They were not even close. What would you have done in this situation, if it were your best friend? Because I genuinely didn't know what to do with someone who had decided, so quickly, to simply forgive the unforgivable. Let me know in the comments. I've turned it over in my head 1,000 times. I called her that one night she was at her mom's, and the version of Nina who answered the phone was someone I almost recognized. The real one, the gutted one, the one whose voice was shredded from crying. "I can't breathe," she said. "I keep seeing it. Him on the beach. With her." And I thought, good, not because I wanted her in pain, but because that reaction made sense, that reaction matched the size of the thing. I stayed on the phone with her until past midnight, just listening, saying almost nothing, letting her rage and sob and circle. When we hung up, I genuinely believed I'd been talking to a woman at the start of leaving him. I went to sleep relieved for her, in a grim sort of way. And then the sun came up, and by the time I'd had my coffee, she was already back in his kitchen. I have never had emotional whiplash like it. 12 hours. That's how long the version of her I recognized lasted. And then, a few days later, like nothing had happened at all, she messaged me about bridesmaid dresses. Bridesmaid dresses. Swatches and colors and whether we should go with the satin or the chiffon. I stared at my phone, reading the words over and over, feeling like I'd slipped into some parallel universe where the cheating had just been a bad dream we'd all agreed to forget. I wanted to scream. How are we talking about hem lengths right now? How is this happening? We had so many conversations after that. Deep ones, long ones, the kind that leave you wrung out. I laid out every single concern a person could possibly have about staying with a cheater. The lying. The deliberate concealment. The fact that he only stopped because he physically couldn't finish, not because of any moral limit. The pattern of the Instagram accounts. The way he set rules for her he'd never follow himself. The way he'd dismissed her insecurities and then proven every one of them right. I said all of it as gently and as honestly as I knew how. And one by one, she batted every single point down. I started to notice she had answers ready before I'd even finished speaking. Preloaded, rehearsed, the smooth edges of phrases that weren't hers. People make mistakes. It happened once and it didn't even mean anything. He was in a bad place. I'd never heard Nina talk like that in 7 years. And slowly it dawned on me where the lines were coming from. They were his. She was reciting his defense back to me, word for word, like a hostage reading a statement to a camera. Every time I made a point that landed, that left a crack, she'd patch it instantly with a sentence that sounded like it had been handed to her. I wasn't arguing with Nina anymore. I was arguing with Marcus through Nina's mouth, and that was somehow the most chilling part of all of it. "We're going to therapy now," she told me, like that settled it. "He's really committed to it. I believe him. I believe he'll never do it again." She told me she wanted this life with him, against all odds. That was the exact phrase she used, against all odds, as if their love was some triumphant underdog story instead of a slow-motion warning. She told me they were going to use the wedding as a celebration of how far they'd come. A celebration of how far they'd come. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from saying what I was really thinking, which was, how far you've come is from him cheating on you to you marrying him. That's the journey we're celebrating. I dissected the whole thing with her, every angle, every possible future, and she remained completely, immovably hellbent on the union. There was no reaching her. She had decided, and my job, as far as she was concerned, was to fall in line. Months earlier I told her, clearly, in plain words, that I didn't even want to talk about the wedding anymore. Not because I didn't love her, but because the whole thing made me feel sick instead of happy. I told her I couldn't drum up the excitement, that every conversation about flowers and seating charts felt like sandpaper on my soul. She knew exactly how I felt. She heard me say it. And she still expected me to show up as her maid of honor, to plan and toast and beam, to carry out every duty with a smile, as if my feelings were just an inconvenient detail to be managed. In the meantime, I'd quietly started changing how I lived. I stopped inviting Marcus to things. When there was a gathering, I'd invite Nina and leave him off it. I stopped going round to their apartment the way I used to, the casual drop-ins on a Tuesday evening, because I couldn't sit in that little flat across from him and pretend. I couldn't look at his face and make small talk knowing what I knew. Every time I imagined it, I felt my jaw lock up, so I just withdrew from him. Surgically, I kept Nina close and pushed him out of frame. There was one dinner before I'd fully pulled back, where I tried to sit across from him and act normal, as a kind of experiment to see if I could do it. I lasted about 40 minutes. He was telling some story about work, gesturing with his fork, charming as ever, and everyone at the table was laughing, and I caught myself staring at his hands and thinking about the lobby, about the toast, about him climbing back into bed. My face must have done something, because Daniel nudged me under the table and mouthed, "You okay?" I excused myself to the bathroom and stood with my hands braced on the cold edge of the sink for 5 full minutes, breathing, telling myself to get it together. Couldn't. That was the night I knew the experiment had failed. I was never going to be able to share a table with him again and keep my face in order. She noticed, of course, and the things she asked of me in response are the things I still can't quite get over. First, she told me not to tell my own partner, Daniel, about any of it. Not a word. Why? Because she didn't want Marcus to lose any friends, and she was worried about his mental health. Read that again. She was worried about the mental health of the man who cheated on her, and to protect him, she wanted me to lie to my own partner, to keep a secret from the person I share my life with, so that Marcus's social circle could stay intact and comfortable. I sat with my phone in my hand and felt something fundamental shift in me. She was managing the fallout of his betrayal by asking everyone around her to absorb it quietly so he wouldn't face a single consequence. And the lying to Daniel was its own quiet torture, by the way, because Daniel isn't stupid. He could tell something had gone cold between me and Marcus. He'd ask casually why I kept leaving Marcus off invites, why I'd gone quiet whenever the wedding came up, why I flinched when his name landed in a group chat. And I'd have to manufacture some reason. I'm just busy. I'm just stressed, I just want a girl's thing this time, and watch him half believe it and file it away. Every one of those little deflections felt like a pebble dropped into the gap between us. I have never kept anything from Daniel, not really, and here I was building a wall through the middle of my own relationship to protect the comfort of a man I despised. For her. Because she asked. That's how far I bent before I broke. Then she called me out for avoiding her apartment. She told me I wasn't inviting him to things, and that I needed to understand he was going to be her husband, and if I couldn't accept that and include him, it was going to be a problem. Problem. Those were her words. And in that moment, she was completely right, just not in the way she meant, because the second she framed it like that, I knew with total clarity that yes, it was going to be a problem, and no, I was never going to include him again. I don't like him. I don't like their relationship. I am not capable of pretending otherwise, and I refuse to perform a friendship with a man whose betrayal I've watched destroy my best friend's self-respect in real time. He loves your friends, she said. He wants to see them. You should include him. And I just stared at the message thinking, absolutely not. They are MY friends. Daniel is MY partner. These are my people, my circle, and I do not want this man anywhere near them. The audacity of it floored me. The idea that I owed Marcus access to my social life, that I was somehow the unreasonable one for not wanting a cheater at my dinner table. She had request after request after request, and every one of them landed with this stunning tone deafness, like she genuinely could not perceive how it felt from where I was standing. If you're enjoying this story so far, take a second to hit that subscribe button. We post new stories like this every single day, and trust me, this one's not over yet. Here's the thing she knew, the thing that makes all of it cut so much deeper. Cheating is one of my greatest triggers and one of my deepest fears. I don't say that lightly. I come from a family that was broken apart by infidelity. I watched it happen as a child, watched the way it poisoned everything, watched a home come apart at the seams over it. And then, as an adult, I was emotionally cheated on by an ex, and it genuinely ruined me for a long time. It took me years to trust again, years to stop checking, years to feel like the ground under a relationship was solid. Nina knew all of this. She knew my history intimately. She knew this was the one thing in the world most likely to gut me. And she still expected me to stand at the front of a wedding and bless a marriage built on exactly the wound I've spent my whole life trying to heal. She was there, I should say, for the worst of my own recovery. When the thing with my ex came out, Nina was the one who sat on my bathroom floor with me at 3 in the morning. She was the one who took my phone away so I'd stop torturing myself reading old messages. She knew, better than anyone alive, what infidelity does to me, because she'd watched it nearly take me apart and helped put me back together. That's what made the asks land so brutally. It wasn't that she didn't understand what she was requesting. It's that she understood completely and asked anyway. She looked at the one person whose deepest wound she knew by heart, and she said, I need you to stand next to that wound, smile at it, and toast it. That's the part I'm still not sure I can forgive. I planned her bachelorette anyway. I want you to understand that I tried. I really, genuinely tried. I booked things and organized things and coordinated with the one other bridesmaid. And the entire time I was doing it, this question kept circling in my head like a vulture. How on earth can I be the maid of honor when I hate the groom and I hate what's happening to my friend? How do I stand up there? How do I give a speech? What would I even say? Here's to the happy couple, may you grow as far as you've already come. I pushed through because I knew how important the wedding was to her. It wasn't just an event to Nina. It was her whole life. Her whole personality, honestly. Everything she'd ever wanted folded into one day. I'd sit at my laptop at night with spreadsheets open. A spreadsheet, for God's sake, color-coded with timings and budgets and a tab for the activities, and I'd catch my own reflection in the dark screen between tabs and think, who is this person? Booking a spa package and a brunch reservation and a little personalized sash. All the sweet, stupid trappings of celebrating love. For a marriage I privately believed was a slow-motion catastrophe. I'd finish a task and feel this hollow click of completion. The same click you get from any chore. And then immediately feel sick that I'd reduced my best friend's send-off into another line item I had to grind through. The dissonance of it was constant. My hands did the planning. The rest of me stood off to the side. Appalled. And I was so alone in it. That's the part people don't see. The only other bridesmaid was Marcus's own sister, his blood. So obviously I couldn't say a word to her. And Nina hadn't told a single other soul about the cheating. Not one person. So there was no one. No one I could call and say, "Am I crazy? Or is this insane?" No one to confirm that I wasn't the unreasonable one. I was carrying this enormous, ugly secret entirely by myself, performing excitement I didn't feel, planning a celebration I didn't believe in, with no one to confide in. It was one of the loneliest places I've ever stood. I'd lie awake at night running the same circular arguments, and there was no one on the other end of the phone who knew the full shape of it. Coordinating with the sister was its own special kind of surreal. She'd message me all bubbly, full of exclamation marks. "I'm so excited. What can I do? This is going to be the best day." And I'd type back something matching her energy. "I know. Can you handle the playlist?" And the whole time I'd be sitting there thinking, "Your brother did this, your family had no idea. I am lying to you with every single emoji." She was lovely, genuinely. That was the awful part. She had no clue she was helping decorate the aftermath of her brother's betrayal, and I couldn't be the one to tell her. And so I just kept matching exclamation mark for exclamation mark and dying a little each time. I even had to mute her on Instagram for months because she posted constantly and not about anything real. She posted about living a quiet, peaceful life, about how grateful she was, about how much she loved her partner, her best friend, her rock. Picture-perfect captions under sun-drenched photos, the two of them looking blissful, and every time one popped up on my feed it felt like a physical shove. I think, peaceful life, are you serious? I know what he did. I know where the bodies are buried. And there she was, broadcasting this glossy fairy tale to hundreds of people who had no idea, and I couldn't stomach it, so I muted her. I muted my best friend of 7 years because I couldn't bear to watch her perform a happiness I knew was built on a lie. And somewhere in there, I think, was the answer I'd been avoiding. If I can't even look at her Instagram stories without feeling sick, how am I supposed to stand at the front of a church and publicly endorse this whole thing? The captions got more elaborate as the wedding got closer, too, almost like she was rehearsing the narrative in public until it became true. My forever. Grateful for this man every single day. Proof that love wins. Proof that love wins. I remember reading that one in the supermarket queue and having to lock my phone and put it face down in the trolley, because I could feel something rising in my throat that wasn't going to be polite. She'd taken the worst thing that had ever happened in her relationship and was busy alchemizing it, post by post, into a comeback story. And the hundreds of people double-tapping had no idea they were applauding a magic trick. I couldn't be one more anonymous heart on that lie. Muting her was the only honest thing I had left, even if she'd never know I'd done it. The breaking point, when it finally came, was almost absurdly small. A logistical detail. I got the schedule for the wedding day, and there it was, in black and white. I was booked in for makeup at 7:30 in the morning, 7:30 a.m., and I just looked at that time and something in me went very quiet and very clear. I thought, this is it. This is enough. I am going to get up before dawn, sit in a chair, have my face painted, put on a dress, and spend an entire day pretending to celebrate the marriage of a woman I love to a man I cannot respect. And I am going to do it on no sleep with a smile. And at the end of it I will have lied with my whole body for 16 hours straight. Something about the specificity of that 7:30, the cold, scheduled reality of it, made the whole thing impossible in a way all the big emotional arguments somehow hadn't. The strange which thing finally does it, isn't it? Not the cheating, not the lying, not the Instagram, not the requests, not the lobby, not the breakfast. A calendar entry. I think it was because abstractions can be argued with forever, but a time on a schedule is a physical fact about a morning that was actually going to arrive. 7:30 a.m. meant alarms set, an outfit laid out, a chair I would physically have to lower myself into. It dragged the whole thing out of the realm of should I, and into here is exactly what your body will be doing, hour by hour on that day. And the second it became that concrete, I understood all the way down that I could not make my body do it. There wasn't enough of me left to fake 16 hours. So I sat down and I crafted a message. I must have written and rewritten it a dozen times. I didn't want it to be cruel. I didn't want to dump all my judgment on her, even though I had a lot of it. I wanted it to be honest and kind and final. In the end, I told her, simply, that I was not able to be the support and the maid of honor she needed and deserved. I told her she deserved someone who could genuinely share in her happiness and her excitement on her wedding day. Someone who could stand beside her and feel joy, not someone gritting their teeth through it. And I told her, as gently as I could, that I couldn't be that person, that I was stepping down. My hands were actually shaking when I sent it. 7 years of friendship, and I was pulling myself out of the most important day of her life. I felt sick. I felt relieved. I felt both at once, which is its own kind of awful. I read the draft out loud to Daniel before I sent it. I finally, after all those months, told him everything, the whole story, start to finish, because I couldn't carry the secret and make this decision alone anymore. He went very quiet while I talked. When I finished, he just reached over and put his hand on my knee and said, "You should have been able to tell me ages ago." And that nearly broke me more than anything Nina had said, because it landed how much the secret had cost, what I'd let it do to the one relationship in my life that was actually solid. He read the message. He said it was kind. He said it was fair. He said, "Send it when you're ready, and not a second before." I sat with my thumb over the button for a long time. Then I sent it. Her reply is something I will never forget as long as I live. She wrote back that everything was already booked and scheduled, that the timeline was set, that this was throwing a wrench into the machinery of the day. And then she said it. She said that me stepping down was her worst fear. Her worst fear. I read those words and I had to put the phone down and walk away from it. Her worst fear was me stepping down from the bridal party. Not the fact that her fiancé had cheated on her. Not that he'd snuck out on a family holiday and lied for half a year. Not the marriage itself or the future, or whether this man would ever do it again. Her worst fear, the thing that scared her most in all of this, was that her maid of honor wouldn't show up to hold the train of a dress at a wedding built on his betrayal. That single message told me everything I needed to know about how completely we diverged. We were standing in two entirely different realities, and there was no bridge left between them. I waited, after that, for the other message. The one where she'd say she was hurt, or she'd ask why, or she'd fight for me the way I'd spent a year wanting her to fight for herself. It never came. There was no "I'll miss you." No "Have I lost you too?" No acknowledgement that what was breaking wasn't a seating chart but 7 years of being each other's person. Just the logistics and the worst fear line and then silence. And in that silence I finally understood that I had become, to her, a vendor who'd cancelled. A gap in the timeline. Something to be rebooked. The grief I felt in that moment wasn't even about the wedding anymore. It was about realizing the friend I thought I had, the one who'd sat on my bathroom floor at 3 a.m., had already been gone for months, and I'd just been too loyal to notice. The wedding is 2 months away now. I'm not going to be in it. And as much as that sentence still aches when I say it out loud, I genuinely cannot force this any longer. It has taken up far too much of my headspace for far too many months. I've been resentful of how much room it's taken up in my mind, resentful of the lies I was asked to tell, resentful of carrying a secret alone, resentful of being made to feel like the villain for simply having a line I wouldn't cross. I gave it everything I had. I planned and I bit my tongue and I muted and I pushed through, right up until the cold little detail of a 7:30 makeup appointment showed me there was no version of that day I could survive with my integrity intact. Do you think I made the right call? Drop a comment below and tell me honestly. Because some days I'm certain, and some days I lie awake wondering if I abandoned my best friend when she needed me most. I do feel bad that it came to this. I want to be clear about that. I'm not sitting here triumphant. There's no part of me that enjoyed sending that message or watching 7 years bend under the weight of it. But marriage is a serious thing. It's not a party. It's not a celebration of how far you've come. It's a promise you make in front of everyone you love, and I take that seriously, maybe because I watched what happens when people don't. We're only 27. We have whole lives ahead of us. And the thought of knowingly marrying someone who cheated on you, choosing it with your eyes open, planning the flowers and the timeline and the 7:30 makeup around it, is genuinely terrifying to me. And here's what scares me most, if I'm being completely honest. The thought I haven't even said out loud to Daniel. It's not that Marcus cheated once. It's that men who build catalogs of women to scroll through, who set rules they'd never follow, who can stroll into a lobby and butter toast the morning after a betrayal, they don't usually stop. They get better at hiding. So what I'm really afraid of isn't the wedding day. It's the next family holiday and the one after that. It's Nina at 35, at 40, with a child maybe, getting another message from another stranger and having so much more to lose, and forgiving it again because she'll have spent a decade practicing how. I couldn't stand at the front of a room and start that clock. I couldn't be the witness who said, yes, I saw all of it and I smiled. I keep coming back to one thought, in the quiet moments, when the resentment fades and there's just sadness left. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when they're standing in a house they chose to build out of kindling. I loved Nina. I still do, in the complicated way you love someone you've had to step back from. But I couldn't stand at the front of that room and lie with my whole body. Not about this, not about the one thing that has shaped my entire life. Maybe one day she'll understand why I couldn't. Maybe one day she'll look back and see that the friend who refused to celebrate wasn't the one who betrayed her. Or maybe she'll marry him in 2 months under a perfect summer sky, and post about her quiet, peaceful life, and never speak to me again. I don't know how it ends. I only know I couldn't be there for the beginning of it. And for the first time in months, when I put my phone down at night, my head is finally mercifully quiet. Guys, we are so close to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 1,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.